presentation on digital hoarding, and just to contextualize things a bit, I do want to have us start just in a true definition of the term hoarding. So just for a little bit of fun, I'm going to start us off with a link to everyone's favorite show, Hoarders, just to give us a sense of conceptualize what we're talking about here. That, you know, we think about hoarding in a physical sense, the items that bog us down, and it's very easy. I even do it myself when I'm cleaning out my house, is we go, oh, digital things, they don't take up space, okay? So they're not clutter. But you still have to go back and manage those files in a digital environment, and they can cause as many problems in a digital sphere as they can in a physical sphere. So I'm just going to start off with a little introduction about who I am. My name is Danielle, and I'm a content strategist at Cold Front Labs in Ottawa. We are a Drupal shop. I've recently only gotten comfortable calling myself this, as I've been reminded by my colleagues that I do actually know what I'm talking about. I started at Cold Front as what I like to refer to as an office ninja. I was brought in to do everything that wasn't code, essentially. So everyone in the office was basically a developer in some form, and they needed somebody to handle everything else because the CEO and the CTO couldn't manage it anymore because we were growing. So I started just doing anything that ended up on my desk. What this turned into was me getting really picky. So for example, during the RFP writing process, I would get picky about the way things were presented, about how things were rewritten. Before this career, I was an English teacher. So I obviously have strong opinions about paragraphs and grammar and how content should be communicated. So as we started to have more and more of this type of work, I realized that this was my niche. And it's been a really interesting field to get to know. And I've also realized that content strategy is essentially the same as education. To be super organized, you have to give people opinions, marking, evaluating their stuff, and being able to just deal with workflows and deal with other human beings, and just having those soft skills to interact with everyone. So yeah, that's my background. And like I said, started off as Office Ninja, but we just completed a content audit for a client of over 10,000 assets. So we're growing, and it's getting more and more fun and interesting. So first I want to start off with what is content strategy. I've also realized this is a very loaded term, and even people in content strategy don't agree with what content strategy means. Oftentimes you think of content strategy and people think, oh, you're in marketing. Okay? That's true in some cases. Some people will say, oh, you deal with SEO, you deal with search engine optimization. That's true in some cases. The school of thought that I tend to follow, the definition that I like, this actually comes from the book Content Strategy for the Web, which was published by Christina Halverson. If you Google her, she's like the name in content strategy. Her business is a business called Brain Traffic, and they are just a content strategy shop. They don't have developers, they just do content strategy. And she has defined content strategy as the planning for the creation, delivery, and governance of useful and usable content. So we're really looking at how is content created, who is responsible for it, and what is the governance cycle associated with that. It's really just about making content a priority as opposed to an afterthought. I'm going to break the cardinal rule of PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to read to you this slide because I think it's so important. It's the only time I promised to do it in the presentation. But this is directly from an article from A List Apart, most people know the blog, that talks about web developers' relationship with content. It's really strange, and as somebody who's new to this field, it's something that I found very jarring. But for some reason, most of the people who make websites don't really care about content. And this summarizes that. So this is, again, Christina Halverson, same person I was talking about before. She says, we, the people who make websites, have been talking about user experience, information architecture, content management systems, coding, metadata, visual design, user research, and all the other disciplines that facilitate our websites. You know, for close to 10 years. This is actually an article from mid-2000s. As a community, we're rather quiet on the matter of content. In fact, we appear to have collectively, silently come to the conclusion that the content is really someone else's problem, that the client can do it, the users will generate it. So we, the people who make websites, shouldn't have to worry about it in the first place. Do you think it is a coincidence then that the web content is, for the most part, crap? Dealing with content is messy, it's complicated, it's painful, and it's really expensive. And yet the web is content. Content is the web. It deserves our time and attention. You don't have to do a show of hands, but I think you can all think of projects, either internally or for clients, where content is this afterthought. We're like 2 weeks from launch, and it's like, oh yeah, we'll get the content from the client. We'll start writing things. We'll start copying and pasting from our old system and just put it in the new one, we'll deal with it later. Content strategy is about having content be part of the beginning of the agile process, not the end of it. So, for those of you who attended DrupalCon in Nashville, there was this whole idea about, be human, think digital. And I really loved Suzanne's keynote this morning because it tapped into exactly what I want to talk about. I think for content strategy especially, we have to empathize. We have to understand what user experience people are coming from, and not even user experience, just their story, their narrative of how they've been exposed to the technology and what are the struggles that they come with, what is their background. So same as when I first started, before I hit the big red button, I wanted to find out people's names and know what their background coming into this presentation is, because I think it has a big impact on people's willingness to take out information. Yeah, our pain points in projects are usually not tech related. They're usually human related. We really have to consider who a person is, who an organization is as we move forward. And I think this is really important for content strategy, especially when it comes to digital hoarding, because hoarding is actually a sickness. So this is the diagnostic criteria for hoarding disorder that comes straight from the DSM, straight from medical literature. And I want us to review it because the definition actually works perfect even in a digital sphere. So there's a difficulty discarding possessions, even if they have no value. You just can't get rid of things. There's a difficulty, this difficulty is rooted from a perceived need to save them. Okay? There's a distress that, I must save this item because it must have value, or it had value at one point. The hoarding itself causes a clinically significant distress or impairment in the person's life, whether it's their social sphere, their occupational sphere, or any other important area of functioning. And this eventually leads to a congestion and clutter in active spaces and active living areas that substantially compromises the intended use. Okay? So I've revised these for digital hoarding definition. So we often have internally a problem, or with our clients a problem, archiving or deleting content from a CMS. I always find this interesting because the beauty of a CMS is you don't actually have to delete anything. You can just unpublish it. But people's unwillingness to unpublish things, even though you still have them and you can tick off the box at any time, really amazes me. So there's an emotional distress there that you have to empathize with. So this unwillingness to archive or delete, okay, leads right into the fact that they believe that somebody someday might want to access that asset. And there's also this erroneous belief that web content is free, right? Hitting publish doesn't cost anything. So we think more content, publish more, but we don't consider the cost of maintaining it and organizing it later on. So this causes significant distress or impairment in communication strategies, workflows, site maintenance, and other important areas of functioning within an organization. And the difficulty in discarding these assets eventually clutters up the CMS and substantially compromises the user experience. And that user experience, I'm talking about your users, but I'm also talking about your site administrators, because they can't find what's in there. So, why? Why does this happen? It's always a symptom of something bigger than the actual hoarding itself. So much like the clinical definition of hoarding, these things are often linked to anxiety and depression, even in a digital sense. So within our organizations, we have anxiety surrounding our content. So does anybody know who this is over here? I know we all know this one. Dave?
Chicken Little.
It's Chicken Little, right? Oh my God, this guy is falling. Oh my goodness, what if someone needs it? There's this trepidation that, we won't have anything to show for the work that we've done. Okay? It won't be there. And there's also an anxiety towards new workflows. It's amazing when something isn't working, when someone will complain about it and how it's so tedious. But you suggest something new that's going to improve their lives, and they're still resistant. Okay? There's an anxiety there that needs to be addressed and empathized with. There's also depression related to digital hoarding. We often have people who are overworked. Content is treated as a side task. just something you're expected to do in your organization, even if you're not a copywriter, even if you're not supposed to be a content editor. It just kind of gets shuffled into your portfolio. There's also a frustration with the existing mess. There's this why bother attitude. It's like, we've dug ourselves so deep, I can't even imagine digging myself out of it. So they feel that they can't clean up the mess and they'll just deal with the way they are, but they're depressed about it. And then there's a lack of interest. Not everybody loves their job. So they might not even want to look at the content assets, but they're being forced to. The reason I bring up these two emotions in relation to digital hoarding is because if you're going to go in and do a content audit, if you're going to go in and do content strategy, you have to realize that content issues are usually directly related to pain points in the organization. You're going to push buttons. You are going to have upset people in meetings. You're going to essentially be running therapy sessions, okay? So know that going into your discovery for your content audit, you're going to have to let people say their piece and feel heard if you're going to have any chance of them listening to you. And this is something when I was starting that I didn't get right. Because it was only later in some projects that I realized it wasn't until I was willing to hear out why the way things were the way they were that change was even like a glimmer of a possibility. So just realize that this empathy process in a content audit is as important as the fancy spreadsheet you end up with at the end. Okay? Doing this at the beginning in the forefront with your colleagues, with your clients, will make everything go much smoother later on. So, what is the solution to this? How can we fix this? Well, we want to perpetuate an idea of minimalism. Free yourself. Now, minimalism is defined as a tool that frees you from what you want to do most. It's a really trendy definition. Minimalism is very trendy right now, as you see in the media. So these aren't digital related, but I don't know if anyone recognizes anything up here. The life-changing magic of tidying up, Marie Kondo. Anyone? Yes? Kondo all the things. Purge everything from your house. It will free you. We as a society are becoming a little obsessive about minimalism, and I think it's because we're a little overwhelmed with everything that we have in our society. We have these amazing technological devices that bombard us. This idea that we need to have more is petering out. We actually want less. And so this is where this trend, I think, is coming from, because when we hoard things, when we have too much, it doesn't actually make us joyful. It often makes us anxious. Because the more things we have, the more responsibility we have, and therefore the more stress we have. So I think this is all tied together, not just in a digital sphere. So I want you to conceptualize any website, even if it is not an e-commerce website, as a storefront. Even if you're not selling a product, you're selling an idea, you're selling a service, you are selling some sort of message. Okay? So consider it always in this manner. Now, my question, would you rather shop here or here? Our users, when they're greeted with this, even if these are the shoes I wanted, even if these are a bargain price, walking into this space is anxiety-inducing, as opposed to this one, where everything is organized and it's chaos-free, and it's going to let me as a user find what I need more easily. A CMS is not quite a storefront. It can be a warehouse, but always be conscious of what you have exposed to your users, okay? Nobody lets you walk into the storeroom of a retail store in the mall, right? And even that should be organized. But just because everything's stored in your content management system, it doesn't necessarily all need to be public-facing, if you follow me. So how do we do this? You internally have this giant mess, or you have a client who has this giant mess, and they're calling you in so that you can clean it up and they can start afresh. And so you need to do a content audit. Content audits are not glamorous. They are tedious, they're a lot of work, and you have to be an organizational nerd to like them even a little bit, which I do. But there are still moments where you're just sick of the monotony. So morale is really important in a content audit, and I'm going to speak to that later. But content audits are not sexy. I wish they were, but they're not. But no two content audits are alike. I'm going to give you a light formula here, but realistically, they need to be goal-oriented, and they're really going to depend on your client. So each content audit is like a little snowflake. which is also I got to throw in our company logo up here, which I thought was really great. So my advice to you, if you take only one idea away from this presentation, is if you're asked to do a content audit, don't worry about full audits or quantitative audits or quantitative or qualitative audits, which I will go over. Just start with a goal. Okay? Break down a one-sentence statement. Can you tell I used to be an English teacher? That encompasses your department's, your organization's goal with this content audit, and work backwards. Okay? So the goal can be something as simple as updating all static pages related to corporate history. We're going to look at all the pages on our site that we haven't touched because they're about the corporation we started, and we've been around 6 years and we haven't been updating them. So let's just go in there and look at that. And that's just one tiny improvement we can make. We can go into all of our blog posts to make sure all of our outlinks are working, and that will inform your content audit. But start with a goal. So that's a nice idea, but here's where you often end up. If you're not doing it internally, if you're going to be working with a client, here's what you get. This comes straight from an RFP. This was an RFP for a giant redesign, redevelopment. There's this one tiny light item in the services sought. It says, collect, analyze, organize, and edit all the company's name, website content. And then they went on to all of their technical requirements and everything else. It's an afterthought, something that they think they need to do and they don't quite know what they're asking for. And you'll see this a lot on the client side of things. And you really have to reframe it in a way that's going to be purposeful for them, because they don't even necessarily know their purpose, they just know that they should do a content audit because they have a lot of stuff. The good news here is, though, okay, if you do it right, the full audit, which I will take you through in a minute, will render a lot of mini audits that need to be done. Remember I talked about that morale issue? You need to make sure that everything is divided up into sizable chunks and manageable chunks. You're going to kind of lead them, say, okay, here's all the little mini audits you need to do. Okay? Ultimately, no one will have time to do them. And they will come back to you and say, hey, do you know those little audits you recommended that we do? We don't have the resources right now. You know the content better than anyone. Could you handle these 3? And then more work for you, which is great. So the 2 most basic types of content audits are quantitative and qualitative. These can be divided into subcategories, but I'm going to keep it really high level today. And a quantitative audit is your full audit. It's where you're going to go in, you're going to scrape the entire website, either if you can through your CMS or through an external tool like Screaming Frog. Anyone here heard of Screaming Frog? A couple people? It's a really great spider crawler tool that just pulls down all your URLs and all your content assets that are publicly available, and they're just put in a beautiful spreadsheet for you. So it just gives you, by the numbers, what types of content do we have, how many of each do we have, and what is the health of your assets in general. So it's going to give you information about status codes. It's going to give you information about headers, word counts, redirects, basically any metric that is exposed, Screaming Frog will go in and pull out. And this is what most clients will ask for. They don't actually know what they want to do with it. But there is a sense that if we don't understand where we are now, then we can't create a plan to get where we need to be. So it does have value, but you'll often finish, and it's like, well, what now with this giant spreadsheet? So this is an example. I can actually load it up, but it's just really daunting. And I know you can't read any of this, but I'm just giving you a sense that it will be this massive piece of data. And then you kind of freeze and go, well, what do I do with this? And I like to believe that this actually leads you, oh yes, so I've actually kind of talked a little bit about this slide. You can't likely, realistically, actually audit all this content, depending on the size of your site, but usually it's not the case. But then you're going to take all of that data and put it into analyzable groups. A really easy place to start is with your status code errors, right? If you're getting 404s, you should go and clean those up and see what the issues are. You might look at all of the uploaded files on the content management system. So how many PDFs do we have? How many images do we have? Let's look at the quality of them. Data blast revisions. You can also do broken out links. The reason I put a star next to this one is because you need to do some pretty fancy Screaming Frog configuration to get this one to happen, but there's some good YouTube tutorials. It's not something right out of the box that you can do, but you can work it with enough magic. And these are easy places to start. This is going to make you a whole bunch of mini audits to go through and complete that are going to be easier to manage, and you'll have a sense of completion as you get through each one. And each one of these becomes a qualitative audit. So I recommend that a qualitative audit should be no more than 100 assets, okay? Especially if you're a one-person team, as you often are during a content audit. That's not always possible. Sometimes you get back 3,000 images, and that's just the way things are going to be. But if you can put it into these small chunks so that you feel success, you close a chapter at the end of each qualitative audit, you're likely to keep morale up during this trudge of a content audit. And as I mentioned, you need a clear goal. And you always have to return to that goal so you don't lose sight of your purpose. So before I jump into qualitative examples, you always have to consider what is the quality that you're going to be evaluating content against. So a lot of people, especially on the marketing end of things, will talk about key performance indicators. So you might decide to look at a collection of content and assess its quality in terms of the traffic it returns on your site. You might decide to look at the quality of engagement that you get for this piece of content. You're going to pick usually just one, maybe two, to evaluate all content against. If this seems like too much for you, and you're like, I don't know what our defined key performance indicators are from our marketing team, you can always just go to the really simple framework of ROT. Raise your hand if you've heard of ROT content before. Couple people? It's redundant, out of date, and trivial. And it just literally every piece of content you go through and say, do we still need it? Nope, it's redundant. Do we still need it? Yes, but it's out of date. It needs to be updated. Do we still need it? Is it trivial? You know what? We've actually realized this isn't serving any of our needs. Let's just get rid of it. I like ROT, and it's great in certain circumstances. Ouch is sort of coming out as a new idea, a new way of doing ROT. It's essentially the same thing with one extra category. So you have out of date again, okay. Unnecessary, which is essentially trivial. Current, you're able to label things and say, hey, they're still good, we're going to keep them. Okay? Or things that you have to write. So especially when you're dealing with a new development, if you're doing a redesign and there's going to be new content that's necessary, you're working from an information architecture and trying to fill in content gaps, you can mark things as have to write. So you really have to look at the case study to decide which one you need to use. But these are two easy fallbacks if key performance indicators just feel a little too daunting for you to define. So, thinking back, this is a situation we recently went through with a client where we were in a meeting and they said, hey, we kind of probably should do a content audit during this giant redesign. So, we think we need a ROT analysis. We think we have about 2,000 assets. Could you give us an estimate? So we did. And they told us to go forward with it. Great. Here's what we found with Screaming Frog. We found over almost 11,000 HTML assets, 3,000 images, and 3,000 PDFs, and a smattering of other things. We even found some random MS Word documents that had been uploaded to the site. So we stepped back. We said, odds are we're not actually going to be able to do a ROT analysis of all of this content, because a ROT analysis suggests actually going in and reading the content and seeing its value to the organization. This is just way too much to realistically look at. So what are we going to do? So we divided it into more than 3, but I'm going to go through 3 mini qualitative audits that need to be completed based on the information that we got from that big quantitative audit at the beginning, that big spreadsheet. So a pain point, a problem that they had in an organization is that their internal document repository and the CMS have different files and no consistency in the organization. There was no clarity on what they had stored internally, what they had on the website. There were draft revisions in different places. It was just a mess. Okay? So we said, okay, we're going to use all of the PDFs that we've just scraped from the website. And we're going to review all of them. Okay? And then we're going to see what their ROT status is. So are these documents still valuable to the organization? If they are, we're going to rename that file consistently. So they decided internally a great file structure for themselves. And then they're going to upload it to the new internal document repository. That's going to be linked to the CMS. So nothing's actually going to be stored on the CMS. It's going to be in their internal document repository, and the developers have connected them there. So we're not going to have this duplication of files. The nice thing about this one is that they're going to get a co-op student to do it. Poor thing. But it's kind of a rudimentary task enough where they just need to go and open every single PDF, look at it, get verification from the communications team that this is the final draft, or compare dates, and it's just a lot of uploading and cleaning up file names. So this is a doable one for them. So they'll do those. Unfortunately, 3,000 PDFs. Someone's going to go and look at them, but it needs to be done. And it's one chunk, and we know at least we've got them only looking at this smaller number than this giant number. So the other small qualitative audit that they're going to take on is that images on the website very inconsistent. They had sort of no content governance. It was the wild, wild west of content authors. So you have these beautiful photography images that are way too big and take forever to load. And then they have these giant tiny pixelated images that are getting stretched across the website as well. So their image situation moving into their new website isn't great. So similarly to the PDF qualitative audit, they're going to go in and review all the images for resolution quality. So this is kind of a key performance indicator, if you will. They're going to rename usable files with a newly defined structure, and then they're going to upload it to their internal image repository. And again, this is going to be connected to the CMS. And again, not glamorous, but doable. It's manageable. The goal is clear, as opposed to this massive data that you don't know what to do with. The last qualitative audit that I divided out for them based on the quantitative audit was that the new website that they were moving towards needs content, right? And it was one of these situations where it was, we're building a new website, we're rewriting everything, right? We're not even looking at what was on the old site, which really turned into, oh no, well, we do need some of that content, so we should probably look at it to, you know, actually I think we're going to keep everything, and we shouldn't really copy and paste everything, so let's at least kind of look at it before we go in. So this qualitative audit is a little bit more complex, and we actually ended up coaching them through this one. So rather than handing it off completely internally, we guided them through the process. So what we decided to do for the new website is they had defined internally a new information architecture for this new site. And we used that kind of as the key performance indicator, which isn't conventional, but the idea being, if it's in the first 3 levels of the new information architecture, if it is an asset that's going to fall within that hierarchy, it should be in for manual review, for somebody to go in and look and say, this content has value, it should be polished up to the best of its abilities. And we're going to go through all of that new information architecture assets, and we're going to do an ouch analysis. Now the reason I picked ouch here over rot is because the new information architecture has content gaps. They have sections that have never been written before, so we need to identify them. And we made this giant spreadsheet that I am going to show you. Just going to load. You got to love spreadsheets if you're going to do content audits, and I know you can't read that, it's far too small, but hold on. Why won't you zoom? There we go. So I'll take you a little bit through this. So we have the new information architecture, which we broke down with, why is this escaping me right now? Serial numbers? That's not quite right. But you have the idea, every asset has a number that corresponds to its place in the hierarchy. So their primary navigation is 1.0, and then below that, the next part of the primary nav is 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And you can see all the submenus below that. Then, what you have is the existing content assets. So this is their old site, and we looked at that content as it stood on the old website, and we basically said, okay, what is its status? Is it out of date? Is it unnecessary? Is it current? Or is it something we have to write? And we labeled it as such. There was also a space where all of the people working on the content audit, so the content authors as well as they had some other internal people working on it, could leave each other comments. So we just kind of, this was like a living document. It changed so many times depending on the needs of the group, which is why I also recommend like Google Spreadsheet is the best thing to do it in so everybody can access it. Just comments about how this content should evolve. So if I actually scroll down, where's a good one? You know, just realistically, this won't be ready for launch, but you know, we need a basic page about what's coming later on. Or you know, this needs to be a landing page, or we think it needs to have a view. So we had a space to sort of share commentary back and forth about how these assets needed to evolve. We also flagged known issues. So if there were content assets, I'm just going down, that we knew had, like, for example, broken out links. We said, okay, on this link right here, before this content gets revised, we have to remember that all of these links that appear in this content are broken and are going to need to be resolved. And we got that information from the quantitative audit. And then what we were also able to do is help the client have a better understanding of content types. So we worked with them to look at how content was written, was it working for them or not, and then redefine the fields that they might need on the new site. And then we haven't done it yet, but we can assign who's going to be responsible for it. So in the governance structure, who has to physically go in and rewrite this content, and then the new path that it's going to exist at. If anybody wants this template or a template like it, feel free to email me. I'll put my email up at the end, and I'm happy to share it around. It's a dauntingly sized spreadsheet, but it's the only way to get sort of all this information in. And it's a tool. It's not a fixed document. It's something that evolves and grows as is necessary. So, my last little tidbit. If you manage to clean up the mess, do the giant content audit, everything's clean and it's good, what steps can you put in place to avoid this problem happening again? And Drupal has this wonderful thing called views. Everyone here knows what a view is? Raise your hand if you know what a view is. Yay, amazing. So you can make a really basic content maintenance page that's going to monitor a lot of your content for you. I am not even a site builder, but this morning on the train I was assisted with building a view by our lovely CTO over here, and now I get it, and I could set this up next time if I needed to. So if I can do it, you can too. The idea being you can make a really basic page with as many views as you want. That's going to filter out the content as you want to flag it and look at it. So the two views I built for our website that I'm going to go in and start cleaning content, because we're also going to go under a redesign very soon, is I want to decide all of the blogs. Okay, our blogs are really out of date, and I want to say that any blog that's older than 5 years, okay, should be looked at. And basically, my plan is to go look at these blogs, compare with the Google Analytics data, and say, are they still performing well? And if they're not, they can go. Because odds are, in our field, tech moves so fast that a 5-year-old blog entry is not really going to be relevant. Now, if I go in and look at the Google Analytics data, and it tells me that this thing's getting hits every week, then of course I'm going to leave it up. But odds are, if it's this old, it can go. And this view is going to help me identify that. Oh, and also, if you're working in Drupal 8, I've been told you could actually link the Google Analytics data right into the view. So for those of you who noted that, it's a possibility. The other view that I decided to set up on this page were sort of general content updates. So this one, the filter criteria is that it's everything except blogs, okay? Because blogs are sort of a snapshot in time, like a news article. So taking out the blogs. And anything that's older than a year, anything that hasn't been updated in a year, we as a corporation should probably go in and look at, revise it. We might have, changed staff. We might have changed the technologies we used. Somebody should go in and look at this piece of content to make sure that it's still up to date. Okay? Views don't take long to configure, and just having this page can make things easier to see the health of your site going through. So that's my whole spiel. I hope I was mildly entertaining. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Nick, what's up?
Well, now that you said you can do that, there's some chunks for you.
Yes. Now that I know how to configure views, I'll get some of Nick's work. Any other questions? As I said, if anyone's looking for template spreadsheets to do audits, I'm happy to share. So feel free to come grab my card if you need it. And otherwise, I think we're done.